Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Contango War's president and CEO, Rick Van Nieuwenhuizen, for a quick interview on his history in the industry, his current projects, and his viewpoint on the current state of junior mining. So, Rick, how are you today?
I'm great, Romeo. Good to see you again.
Yeah, it's great to see you. I know there's a couple of things we want to talk about today, but I'd love to start with your history, both in the industry, but also just in rocks generally. So I'd love to know what got you into a geology education, and was your career path always clear when you were studying, or did you have different plans and life kind of took its own route?
Yeah, no, I knew I wanted to be a geologist from a pretty young age. I always liked rocks and maps, and that kind of just directed my interest and studies. And I knew I wanted to. I actually went back to university in Belgium, and because I knew I wanted to work in Africa, I had set my that was one of my life goals was to work in Africa. So I actually did my studies at the French section, even though I'm from the Flemish part of Belgium. And that served me well because I actually did end up doing a lot of work in West Africa, so where French was a good language to know. So yeah, no, I've always known I wanted to be a geologist. And in fact, I wouldn't know what the heck else I'd do if I wasn't.
That's clarity of purpose is definitely good. And I know you kind of went from your geology career went from school to ultimately being VPX at Plasterdome, but then shifting to kind of founder CEO of Nova Gold. There's obviously some big skill set differences between those two roles. So I'm just eager for you to talk about what changed in your skill set to make that shift and what that kind of culture shock was like.
I guess it kind of started back when I actually started working on my own as a consultant. I'd worked for a number of companies, Freeport and a few other companies over the years, and they were all big companies. And I got kind of tired of working for big companies. And so I started my own company and just doing geological consulting. It was a lot of fun, a lot of success. But then I found I was always on the outside. And that's when I decided to join Plasterdome and get more of a worldwide view of exploration and of the exploration business, of the business of exploration. And in that, I became BPX for Plasterdome, and ended up doing a lot of overseas work, and specifically in Kazakhstan, where I was effectively the country manager because we got involved with a big project there. So that actually was a significant shift from being a field geologist and worrying about rocks only to worrying about and meeting with government officials on how do we get a license here. Once we have a license, how to negotiate for land to develop a mineral project. So it really sort of broadened my whole view of exploration and the mining business, or the business of mining. And then eventually I got tired of working for a big company again, and that's when I formed Nova Gold.
Sure. And obviously, people are a bit more complicated than rocks, or at least can be, at their worst and best.
Unfortunately, I think that's a truism.
Yeah. But in switching to founding Nova Gold, what would you say is the kind of biggest difference from when you were even a country manager in Kazakhstan? Like, what was the skill set change that mostly occurred founding your own company?
I mean, the fundamental difference is raising money. Mm-hmm. When at Plasterdome, you had a budget, so it wasn't like it was infinite, but you argued for a budget. You had your reasons why you're asking for your budget, and you either got the budget. Generally, you either got the budget or you didn't. Because you have sort of reputational basis of this is what I can do with this amount of money, and here's my reasons for it. In the junior exploration business, you have to not only have to come up with the budget, but you have to come up with the money to support the budget, and sure. That is an absolute fundamental difference. And obviously, if you're public, then you're at the whim of the public markets.
Sure.
If you're private, obviously you're at the whim of private investors. So they're both difficult. And at times the public markets are more generous, and at other times they're less generous. And so one of the things I did learn is doing all the right things at the wrong time doesn't necessarily have a good outcome.
Sure. And sometimes with this industry, there's a number of bad times, right? Kind of go in and
Yeah,
out.
I mean, we made a major discovery, a good discovery in Montana with a company called Tintina, and we did everything. We defined a nice resource, good quality, high quality copper asset, and but it was just the wrong time in the market, and you could never get any real traction. So
Sure.
it's a technical success and wasn't a huge financial success, at least not for me personally. But some people, I'm sure people made money along the way. But so doing timing is another thing to sort of, in addition to raising money, the timing at which you can raise money is also a key part of that.
Yeah, and speaking of timing, despite the price of gold reaching and then flirting with all-time highs, it's kind of commonly accepted, or at least I hear it all the time, that we're in a bear market for mining, particularly junior mining. I know this isn't your first one, presumably, so I'd love to hear just your advice to investors going through it for the first or 10th time, and what does a way out look like for these kind of markets of mining?
Yeah, I mean, just speaking to the gold market right now, I mean, I think this is the fourth or fifth time we've bumped up against 2,000, and you had the overseas weirdness that went up to 2170 or whatever it went up to, and then right back down as it got back to Europe and North American trading. So yeah, I mean, obviously, to invest in the junior exploration space, it's hard to play be a trader. And so you gotta be in it for the longer term, and the longer term maybe 2 or 3 years realistically to achieve the objectives of the company, and they've got to have the ability to raise the money. So you have to believe in management to be able to do that, because that's fundamentally where it comes from. Obviously, it's easier for any management team in a good market, but even a poor market, a good management team can raise money for a good project. So I think advice wise, don't pay too much attention to the gold price today. If you're invested in gold, you have to believe that gold's going to be higher. That doesn't mean you invest in projects that aren't economic at today's gold price, because there's such a thing as inflation, and generally, gold is a good hedge against inflation. So, but that doesn't mean it's not immune to inflation.
Yeah.
So if you have a lousy project now, if the gold price goes up to $2,500, you probably still have a lousy project.
Sure.
It's just it's going to cost more to get it there. So invest in good projects, good management team, and then watch the timing in terms of where you are in the overall market cycle. And we talked about the Lassonde curve, I think, before, and that's an important one just for investors in general. I think it's a very good educational tool to familiarize yourself with the Lassonde curve and what does that mean for your investment. If you're there for the big hole in one discovery hole, where that share price is going to move, and if they can keep offsetting it and make a good solid discovery and come up with a resource estimate, then just beware that the other side of the Lassonde curve is mostly downhill for a ways.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like simple advice, but know what stage you're investing in, actually, I think would save a lot of people some headaches.
Absolutely, yeah.
Speaking of inflation, there's been a lot of chatter lately. I certainly hear it, and there's news articles, etc., about it. How inflation has uniquely affected miners and gold miners. Lots of people are saying even more precisely. Curious if you've felt that squeeze and what you think inflation means for the industry.
Well, certainly, mining, because you're actually building something. Presumably, if you're talking about actually going and mining, not just exploration, but
Sure.
It affects exploration too. But absolutely, for our own project with Contango. When we started down the 70-30 joint venture with Kinross in September 2020, we had an estimate of what we thought it would cost, and these were Kinross estimates. So they're, I'd say they're fairly good estimates. So they've done a lot of business in Alaska over a long period of time. So they're used to what the costs are up here. And keep in mind, we weren't building a mill and a tailings facility and all these things. We were just getting ready to mine, so the quarry operation effectively. But the costs went up about 25% from what they were expected to be originally, and so that was all just wages and the cost of moving dirt, basically, building roads. So definitely is very real. It's definitely flattened out. I think we're sort of fundamentally affected by inflation, but also, when now the oil price has come off as an example, the oil price, we've assumed an oil price of $100 a barrel for our internal purposes, and for the bankers, more importantly, for the bankers' internal purposes, for lending money. And here we are, just above $70. So definitely, that aspect, and it's a significant aspect for any mining project, is the price of oil, price of diesel.
Sure.
So very real. I'm not sure that it's unique to the or it affects the gold mining industry or the mining industry any more than any other industry that's actually building something. If you're a technology stock, then you may be somewhat immune to it. But if you're a software technology stock,
sure.
if you're a hardware technology stock, you're definitely not immune to it. And if you're going to be building chip plants, not potato chips, but computer chips, you're definitely going to be affected by inflation. And I think we're certainly continuing to see that. I'm not sure I believe the CPI numbers in terms of that they reflect inflation. So
that's my instinct too.
I think there's enough other folks to listen to besides the government that tells you that, and everybody knows themselves when they go to the grocery store.
Yeah, so, some things that are hard to hide behind statistics when you finish at Costco.
They call it now, but they sell the same product for the same price, but less of it.
Yeah, shrinkflation. There's a lot of that going on. But to tie back to your history, I'm really curious. I mean, I'm quite familiar with the Contango War Story at this point, but what drew you to it initially?
Look, it's a fantastic asset, and it was kind of high centered and kind of lost in space a bit. The joint venture between Contango and Royal Gold. So Contango made the discovery. I'd say, call it an inferred resource type discovery, 1 million ounces. Brought in Royal to basically finance completing a pre-feasibility level study. So it was all, mostly internal drilling. Most of the money was spent on internal drilling and studying metallurgy and hydrology and geotechnical and all that stuff. But it wasn't a project that Royal Gold wanted to bring to production because they're a royalty company. They wanted royalty, but it wasn't. They also didn't really want to invest any more money because that's what they sort of agreed that they would do. And I think their hope was that they'd sell it to somebody who was an operator and take a royalty and move on from there. But unfortunately, at 1 million ounces, it wasn't big enough to attract any major company and not even any sort of mid-tier company. And so it got stranded because neither Royal Gold really wanted to spend any more money on it. Contango shareholders, which had largely been friends and family financed, didn't want to spend any more money on it because, hey, you've got a 1 million ounce deposit. That seems plenty big. Go mine it. It was kind of the attitude.
Sure.
But it got high centered. And so, I was brought in to sort of kind of right the ship and give it a particular direction. And we did that by forming the 70-30 joint venture with Kinross, who had an underutilized mill and just being established here in Alaska, you get to know those sorts of things. And of course, Kurt Freeman, who's, been associated with the company long term, Uh, he was the one who sort of made the introduction of the Contango management to introduce me to it too. That's how the whole thing kind of came about.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I know Contango primarily operates in Alaska, but and this is something investors are always asking in six events, is broadly, what do you think, as somebody who's worked in a number of mining jurisdictions, what makes a winning jurisdiction? What should investors be looking for when they evaluate the jurisdiction a project takes place in?
I think it's is sort of the recent history. Have there been mines permitted? And if there are projects that haven't been permitted, what are the reasons for them? Alaska, I think, scores really high on that. Obviously, you've got the people always bringing up Pebble, and that Pebble's pretty much a one-off. It's there's a number of things that didn't go right for that project, including a lot of it self-imposed. But other projects up here have been permitted. So Alaska's a good jurisdiction. It's not the only good jurisdiction. I think a good part of Canada is a great place to work. Other places, I wouldn't go try to permit a mine in California anytime soon. But I'd go to Nevada and Arizona and Utah and Wyoming and Idaho. So yeah, I mean, in the U.S. context, those are all good jurisdictions. There's a few things on the East Coast that depending on what you're mining, and all over Canada. But and I've worked all as we talked about, I've worked all over the world. I had a great time working in Russia and Central Asia, but I wouldn't spend a nickel of my own money there.
Sure. No, there's a variety of reasons why that might be, challenging. Certainly now, but historically as well.
10 years ago, it was not as challenging, but today it would be really, really difficult.
Yeah.
I think Latin America, what's going on in Panama is with basically the government now today, I think, telling them they have to shut down. So this is after a company, and this is First Quantum's a first tier copper producer in the world. They invested $10 billion and tell them to shut it down because people are unhappy in the streets with the outcome of a very long multi-step negotiation that took place to give them a sanctioned something that was approved by Congress. And because they don't like the president, now they're saying, well, you got to shut the whole thing down now. It's unbelievable fact, and I don't know how anybody would spend another nickel in Panama.
Yeah, it's not a great sign.
And they've outlawed mining.
Yeah, that's usually a very bad sign for jurisdiction.
Probably not high on anybody's list right now.
Yeah, probably not. But no, that's fair, and I appreciate the context of different American jurisdictions, even different jurisdictions in Canada have pretty different, mineability or likelihood of actually making a project.
Yeah, and in Canada, of course, the First Nations is always one of the first things that you think about if you're looking at a project. Is what's been resolved? What has the federal government settled with the First Nations? Has the province settled with the First Nations? What's the relationships? What are the relationships like? And of course, if you're acquiring something, and how good or poor of a job has the company's interactions been with the First Nations? Are you walking into a slaughterhouse?
Yeah, which some folks are. Won't name names, but I've certainly seen that jurisdiction to jurisdiction for sure.
Yeah.
Well, one question. I know you're president and CEO of Contango War, but also chairman of two other companies, which it's a lot of things to do, obviously. So I'm curious how you manage time between those different companies, different activities among them.
I always say to people, Contango is my day job, and sort of evenings and weekends spend talking with the presidents of and other members of the other companies. I mean, first of all, it's having good leadership at those other companies. So I'm not doing the day-to-day there. It's more guidance and relationships, introducing people to the right people. So introducing our exploration manager and our president and things to the right people so they can make the connections and kind of run with it. I almost kind of consider it sort of mentoring.
Sure.
So we didn't really mean to have 3 companies on the go. That's what happened during COVID. Too much, not enough travel, and too much idle time, and thinking about other things that we could get started. So,
and who needs sleep, right? That's overrated.
Only going to be here so long.
Yeah, and who needs the sleeping time? One question. I know you invest personally in some mining companies, and this is really for our investor base. I'm curious what you look for in exploration projects and management teams. You mentioned earlier, obviously jurisdiction, but their ability to raise money, key part. But are there any other things that you look for when you're evaluating kind of exploration projects and management?
Yeah, I guess it's quality of. I mean, besides quality of the management, it's quality of the project, which I don't know if it starts or ends with jurisdiction, but that's certainly a key piece of it. And that and also recognizing the Lassonde curve. So what are you investing in this company for? Are they because they have great management, they have the ability to raise money, and they have a good track record of identifying good projects to get to that discovery hole, because that's the steep part of the curve. That's where you can make the most money the quickest. But that's not the only kind of investment. If they have a good quality project, you might want to invest in the long term, buying on the lows, because you believe in the project, believe the management team can actually get it to a place where a major company will buy it at a nice premium. But you got to be in for the long haul on that one. So you just got to remember to buy low and make it so that you're getting a good return over the 2 or 3 or 4 years that it's going to take to get there. And I think that's the other thing I would suggest to people or recommend to people is think about your timeline of investment. Are you going to be in this stock for 6 months or for 6 years? And both are legitimate investment strategies, but they're definitely different.
It goes back to your comment earlier of know what stage you're investing in, right? Like, you're here for a short, fast, high risk buck, or is this something that it's in development, you rely on it, it's low, and you're going to make money over 5-6 years?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I appreciate that. One question I always like to ask is the end of interviews, as we're getting towards the end of this year, jumping into 2024. What are you most excited for next year? What are you looking forward to the most?
Gold production.
There you go.
Yeah, Manh Choh, we're on track to meet our objective to have gold production and have cash flow back to us. That's probably the most important thing is not just the gold production, but the first batch of gold will basically go to pay to get the company sort of on step, if you will, to pay for the working capital, so that we don't have to borrow money for working capital anymore, or spend our own equity for working capital. That it's self-generating at that point. So sometime in the middle of the year, we should be getting a dividend check that we then can use to add value for our shareholders. So that's probably the best way to express that. So it starts with gold production, but then when we're actually getting a check back from the joint venture in the form of the dividend to the company, then that'll be a real success. And then we can start thinking about advancing our other projects like Lucky Shot and looking out at some of our early stage assets and adding value there. So.
Oh, hey, literally making money is a good thing to be excited about. It's a great answer. But thanks, Rick. Really appreciate the answer to all my questions, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Yeah, again, happy holidays and good seeing you again. I'm sure we'll see you in the new year here.